Let's start with the state of the art in terms of location technology. I remember when we started Surf in 1995, you could either get good location, real time, non-real time, or bad location, real time. Companies like Trimble had focused a lot on getting very precise location, but you had to wait 10 minutes to 10 hours, depending on where you are, to really get that location. Clearly, in the consumer world, that was not acceptable. So we focused a lot on solving what we call the fundamental location for consumer, which was how do you make it work in urban canyons, how do you make it work under foliage. And the last challenge has always been how do you make it work indoors, and how do you make it work in terms of accuracy vertical. Because as you know, the satellite system is above the Earth. We did try to convince the US government to have a satellite system below the Earth so we could get good accuracy. But that obviously did not work. So Ganesh, starting with you, how are you solving that issue?
Sure. Well, I'm glad the U.S. government didn't put a satellite system underground because we wouldn't be in business. So I think obviously we're all here because GPS has done such a phenomenal job of enabling a whole host of applications and services that in the absence of GPS, I don't think many of us in this room would have existed. But obviously, GPS still has challenges. It's a satellite-based system. It's medium Earth orbit, and therefore has the limitations of it doesn't work as well in urban areas. It doesn't work in indoors. It doesn't work vertically. So there are many areas where GPS needs augmentation, and that's where we think companies like ours are really trying to push the boundary and take GPS to the next level. By providing you precise indoor positioning, be it in urban areas or even in a suburban area, because if you have a multi-story structure, you cannot determine your location precisely. And what's more important is that the state of the art has now moved to the point where knowing which floor of a building you're in is equally important, because if you're indoors, that's obviously material information that are you on the ground floor or the third floor of a building. And what's exciting to me is that what's happened in the last year or two is that the FCC has actually issued new regulations on determining which floor of a building or indoors you are when you dial 911. And for those of you who may remember, this is sort of how GPS got into cell phones 20 years ago, was that the FCC mandated wireless callers to locate where you are when you dial 911, except the requirement was only outdoors. And in 2015, the FCC updated those rules to find you indoors. And in November of last year, 2019, they actually have now required all wireless operators starting next year, 2021, to determine what altitude or what floor of a building you're in. And I think this is going to have a transformational effect on the geospatial business, because now you will be able to, at scale, determine not only horizontally but vertically where you are, and suddenly the whole world is going to go 3D, right? So you're now, till now, all the geospatial data we've been looking at from satellites and other places has been very two-dimensional, and now we're truly going to go three-dimensional because there's this big momentum that the FCC has created with the augmentation of the 911 rules. And so we're very excited. I think there's a lot of companies which are trying to transform that, and I think this has applicability to everybody in this room because it truly will enable you to get new signals of information that then can place people and objects in three-dimensional space.
So let's take it to Vivek and Arra. One good attribute of location is law of physics says one person cannot be in two locations at the same time. So given that context, how do you use location in the personalization experience for your brands and for your people?
Vivek? Okay, let me go ahead. So, yeah, absolutely. I think, it's for all brands, I mean, they really want to understand everything that the consumer or the person is the interactions that the person has with their brand, with their category. And the more precise you get, the better it is. It is a holy grail in terms of knowing everything that the consumer is doing, even at moments when they are not, especially at moments when they're not just interacting with brands, but doing other things. Because that is where you get that's where the possibilities are. That's where you get the insight in terms of how can I create new touch points? How can we be more effective in terms of ensuring that this consumer, if it's not a consumer of my brand, becomes my brand user. So to that extent, it is absolutely essential to be more precise. So as Ganesh is mentioning, if you know that there is a consumer in this particular area, but where exactly, what are the other the other stimuli that this consumer is getting, and how is this consumer behaving? If you don't understand that accurately, you may get to some different conclusion. You may end up being less effective, being less efficient in terms of spending your marketing dollars.
Yeah, Vivek is right. I think in our case, with our program that's targeting seniors, about 75% of our seniors live within 2 to 3 miles of one of the 16,000 gyms that offer a SilverSneakers program. But we know that they spend 2-3 hours perhaps at that location. Much of their time, by the way, is spent socializing. It's not actually spent bench pressing. They actually enjoy just getting together and having a cup of coffee or tea. In fact, the #1 complaint we get from the gyms is that our members drink way too much coffee. But that's a good thing, because we know that we're keeping them healthier. The health plans, for example, have recognized that if in fact they're working out, they cost the health plan, believe it or not, over $1,600 a year less than someone who's not an active member. So getting back to this location conundrum, we're trying to bring the experience to where people are in rural locations, where they're not necessarily near a gym location, because we know that they don't necessarily want to go work out, but they may want to go play cards or get together at a park. They just want to socialize. So the government agencies that regulate reimbursement for these sorts of things and are recognizing that keeping Americans healthy this way can be very inspiring. And we're looking at programs that are happening in India and Japan that are really cutting edge, that can help us shape the way I think Americans age with grace in this country.
So one of the things which has changed in last, I would say, few years is the real-time nature of geolocation. If you go back to the older times, the maps were updated maybe once a year. Actually, I was in a meeting, and it looks like the US Mapping Authority still updates it once a year. But the world is changing much faster. In the developing countries, maps are changing literally every day. So if you think location in the broader perspective, GPS can give you real-time location, no question about that. But in the geolocation context, with the maps and other information, how do you get real timeliness into it? Rohan.
Yeah, that's a great point. We also think of it exactly that way, and the last 25 years building maps in India have kind of taught us that everything changes really fast, it's dynamic, it's uncertain, and if you're going to serve the needs of enterprises and customers in India, you're going to have to keep up. And essentially, that's why we've built out this digital map twin, a 4D map that kind of reflects real-time the changes in 3D, not just 2D, outdoor, indoor, in photorealism. And this empowers two really big paradigm shifts. One is autonomous systems. So of course, autonomous driving is the ability to kind of understand, perceive, predict the changes in the road conditions around you so that the car can drive, essentially avoid an accident while getting to the long path destination. That's an autonomous system that depends on a digital map twin to be created real time and updated real time, probably at the edge. But you can broadly think of autonomous systems outside of cars as well. These could be systems in factories. This could be business intelligence about what's happening, what's changing. And so that's a big paradigm change in terms of going from data-driven decision-making and then serial action on top of it to autonomous systems. And the other big paradigm shift that this digital map twin or 4D map or location data enables is immersive, ubiquitous experiences and computation or connectivity for consumers. So AR, VR, voice UI, being able to kind of ask questions or feel like you're somewhere else. So kind of exaggerate or kind of transcend that limitation of being in two places at one time. If I'm sitting here, can immerse myself in a real-time experience, a virtual world, that's fundamentally changing the paradigm. So people are asking, what's after mobile? Well, it is AR, VR, and immersive experience. We're seeing this shift with voice AI. So what does it take to create this? A whole lot of technology, a whole lot of thinking about the future, a whole lot of understanding of what's uncertain, and kind of packing a cloud map, a cloud database, real-time syncing, AI, ML, IoT, civic sensors, a convergence of data, and a real-time pipeline, which is man plus machine. Because, I mean, to be able to create a map, you can't just depend on an autonomous system. You've got to mix man and machine to create this kind of 4D map. So yeah, it's pushing the edge of what's possible. It's thinking about what should be. That's kind of where we're going.
Sunil, how real-time is your system?
I would say, first of all, it's very expensive to what Rohan is referring to, and we see a lot of challenges. And when we are processing data, to kind of really understand the real-time aspect of it, stores are changing, Subway is shutting down, and maybe Jack in the Box is opening up. It's not just about the maps, and there is no fast way of knowing that for a month, there was nobody there. And all of a sudden, our system thinks, oh, it is a Subway, someone is going to like Subway over there. So to be able to kind of, reduce that error or remove that error is very, very expensive. There is no tech company out there. You really have to go to the source, which means we really have to go to Subway because they're the only one that knows that I'm closing my store, and Jack in the Box that knows that I'm actually replacing that location with Jack in the Box. So for what we do is, for at least the major brands, we don't work with the data aggregators because we end up creating a lot of errors in our platform. So we started working with the brands directly, and we work with about 5,000 brands, and that's where I think most of the users kind of spend most of their time with those brands. But that doesn't mean that another 15 million brands that are more into the mid-market, small. So those are more on demand. So what we do is we try to kind of work with a small yoga studio to ensure that we are getting their location through them. So I think a lot of that has to be kind of, there is no company, I think there's a lot of companies, they need to really invest a lot of capital to be 100% proof. So I don't think we're there. I think we'll probably in low 90s or high 80s. But if we really want to hit 100%, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
So last night when we were going out for dinner, we saw a very interesting example of real-time nature of this location ecosystem. Girish was going to treat us to dinner, and I was suggesting let's go to a pizza place, which was close by. And he was sort of, yeah, maybe. And suddenly he said, yeah, let's go. So what happened was we were in the vicinity of that pizza place, and his American Express card sent him a discount coupon for 10%. And suddenly, that became our dinner place. So Vivek, in that context, I mean, how does this happen in a real time, and how are you working with brands to make that experience? Because, I mean, it clearly made money for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, no wonder, Girish decided all of a sudden to just go for that at 10%, with a lot of impact to him. It does. And I think, the brands are constantly, and some of our brands are constantly looking, at opportunities where they can get the share of that occasion. It is absolutely, critical for them. That's how the revenue, comes in. And using using geolocation, using that information, I'm just going back to what I said earlier, gives you a very good understanding of what this consumer or this person, their behavior, what are they likely to do, and again, given when you integrate, and that's the most critical part. It is about connecting the different dots. It's just not the geolocation data on its own, but there's everything else that is also available. Within of course the GDPR compliance, you have passive data that you can mine, and you're connecting all those dots. And once you make those connections, that's when you become really effective in terms of being able to target your specific consumer, like Amex did, in terms of providing an incentive for someone to change their behavior, not necessarily change their behavior. They were anyway going to go and eat, but ensuring that that moves towards their brand, or which helps them monetize that opportunity, and that's the most critical thing. And we do a lot of work in terms of, at a very basic level, just trying to understand, what is motivating the consumer. So, using geolocation data, obviously you understand a little bit about the, whether it is longitudinal data or it is their historical behavior, and then you can target specific, you can push in specific questions on the devices to again just get a better understanding in terms of what is it, why do they behave in a particular way, why does this particular 35-year-old lady behave in a particular way versus somebody else. So you can get a really good understanding in terms of what is it that drives them, what are the motivations, and typically you would rely on people's memories and things like that. You would ask them questions, but here very specifically, at this moment, this is what has happened, and you can be very precise to get a much better understanding.
Arra, in terms of personalized health, how important is real-time nature of location, or you're happy with non-real-time behaviors?
No, I think real-time data is important. I was also going to say, I'll probably be the only one over the course of this summit to speak about the what I describe as the longevity economy. There was a great book that was written by Joe Coughlin, who runs the MIT Age Lab, and he talks about the $8 trillion of the US economy that's controlled by people 65 and older. And it's interesting because if you think about their adoption of technology, we've actually done a lot of study to understand how they use the mobile phone. There is such a huge disparity between someone who's 62 and someone who's 65 today. Like a gigantic, disparate sort of behavioral change that's taken place. So recognize, though, that the pig and the python are all these baby boomers who are aging, they're living longer. They will demand, I think, location services so that they can have more precise enablement. They have less time. They don't want to fool around. They don't want to mess around. They want to get where they want to go, and they want to get that service quickly. And they've got the disposable income, by the way. They're wealthy. The average person over the age of 65 in the US has a net worth of about $720,000. That is significantly larger than any millennial. So when you think about then framing the services that you offer to them, I think it's important. To the point about health, look, I think a great portion of the economy clearly is spent in the healthcare space. It's still less than 20%, but very close. The opportunity to ensure that the services that they get, whether it's at their local community hospital or clinic, or at a program that's focused on well care like ours, they want that service to be quick. They want it to be knowledge-driven. They want services that are meaningful to them. I think the more precise we can get in providing those services, certainly the better off we'll be. And again, to paint the picture, this older group of Americans are becoming much more open to the idea of receiving the technology and the service.
I think the big challenge there is how to make the user experience so seamless. I'll give you an example. This is not 65-year-old. My father-in-law is 80 years old, and we bought Alexa speakers for him so that they can easily talk. And then he calls me up next day. What was the name of the woman who speaks in that speaker? So he's giving her, a few different names, and obviously Alexa only responds to Alexa. So Amazon is smart enough that they now allow you to personalize. So he has figured out whatever name he wants to do. So the key thing is we take some of these things sort of for granted, but for a normal consumer, how do you make that experience so seamless that they don't have to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the great challenge. I think that's why we rely on Sunil and his colleagues. Think about the technology that makes it that ubiquitous.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the use cases that we're talking are very, very merchant-driven and like business-driven. I personally experienced that. I recently purchased a house in Burlingame, and historical information says it's a great neighborhood. Great restaurants, and everything is great over there. And so I had no doubts that I'm actually buying in the right area and all that. Great schools and everything that's historical about that community. And when we started living there, I don't have any regrets, but I said, I wish I knew that, maybe this street, the traffic level is rising, versus this street. And there is no information around that. And local restaurants are great because people from San Mateo and Millbrae are coming there, and we have no idea where people from Burlingame go. So you're getting this picture about the community that is a little bit different than what's available on the internet. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of how do you really kind of aggregate that information and present it in a simple way. Again, talking about simplicity essentially, that the consumers can benefit, and it is not about they are being marketed all the time, but it's more about it's their data. That data is coming because they're using some app, and they have consented to that application that your data could be used. But if we can take that information in a way that we can bring it back to them for community development, and then to make a better lifestyle and choices and all that, I think that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity. We are doing few things, but I'm guessing there has to be some company that can simplify that and make a lot of value out of it.
So does that mean that Jack cannot retire? He has some more work to do?
I mean, I think.
But if I may add, I think, technology today, and I understand, your father who's 80 years old who had not had that technology. But if you look at everybody else who's coming in who are going to be the future users, for me, just integrated. For them, it is something which is just happening. It's not something that they're thinking I'm doing something. It's just happening. This is the way of their life. This is what is. It's so integrated into everything they do that I really don't see this being, in terms of ensuring. Yes, of course, you want to create a better user experience, but for them it is like, yeah, this is the way things operate, right?
Right.
If I can add a counterpoint, though, I think I think what's coming, though, is this technology is pervasive in a bad way, quite simply put. This is the age of distraction, the distraction economy, the distraction technology, this intrusive, privacy-driven, ignoring, advertising-driven world. This is not an organic experience. And this is actually the problem with the industry. And I think people are highlighting it, that location-based advertising, in a sense, it's actually not what people are looking for. People have intent, and they want an answer. This inbound, proactive kind of sending me spam is actually not what people enjoy. So the nice thing, though, is that technology is becoming so seamless. And to take the example of Alexa, when technology is so ubiquitous or available in real time, that my intent can be served in real time with an answer that I care about, I don't need to have spam inbound. So my belief is serendipity should be organic. I should have continuity of the organic experience I'm having. I'm happy to get a WhatsApp from a friend or a family member. I'm not happy to see an ad in WhatsApp. So So because this, and I think actually there's huge inefficiency in the advertising economy. There's just, the incentives are perverted, where you want to send out many location-based ads. And frankly, it's not needed, because I'm not looking for shoes continuously. I'm not looking to eat continuously. When I'm looking, please send me something. So, I mean, just like Wall Street is built on volumes and transactions, I think the location-based, or broadly the advertising industry, is based on volumes and transactions which are irrelevant. So I think there's a reality check that is coming now that consumers are pushing back. And I think the industry needs to go back to the traditional ways of create value and make money, rather than just try to create money out of thin air, which is a distraction or consumption-led. So.
Well, if I guess I was wondering when we'd hit that privacy point. but obviously that's the elephant in the room. I think going back to this question you were raising about how do you make this all ubiquitous, and I think two things as an industry we all need to evolve into. One is, for the age demographics you're talking about, it's more about understanding the 65 and above demographics, which I think as technology companies, we have done a very poor job of. We don't really track that, although the demographic shift is happening in that direction where large parts of the world are becoming more aged. And if you look at actually, even I read The Economist the other day, large parts of the world are shifting to be more than 60 years above. There's more 60-year-olds above in the world today than there were, I think, in 2019. So I think the shift is happening, and we haven't done a good job of sort of understanding that shift and how you adapt the technology. But the other more important thing that needs to happen, and I think we're all sort of have to play a role, is privacy, because it's about control. The elderly and as you're pointing out, everybody today does not want to be served up an ad that they didn't ask for. They want that to be under their control when they want that information. And in the absence of that, we're not going to be able to, I mean, the location will become a four-letter word that today it is being treated as such. And I think it's incumbent on all of us here to figure out what's the intersection of geospatial data with privacy, and especially when we transition now. I mean, we've all been living in a world where GPS has been sort of the source of our information. But now when we move to the indoors, where privacy becomes even more paramount, what is the intersection of privacy and new signals and new capabilities that now could truly get information about where you are? Are you visiting an office, a gym, a strip club, whatever it might be? Now suddenly all of that pieces of information can be used in a manner that is, could do more harm. So I think that would be an interesting discussion, is to figure out what is the, how do these different elements play together, especially as we look forward, because geospatial data has such a big role, as we know, in understanding how communities grow and evolve, and do it in a privacy-friendly manner would be critical.
Okay, we have 2 more minutes. Any question from audience? Otherwise, I'll end with last question. Any question from anybody in audience? Okay, so
one question, couple of questions here.
Yes.
To Rohan, autonomous driving in India, how's it going to be different? Autonomous driving in India.
See, the context of India, this next billion users, developing market. Sorry, just to repeat the question, you asked, how is autonomous driving going to be different in India?
Yes.
The context of the next billion users in India, a developing market, which probably 5 years from now will be the 3rd largest economy in the world, growing fast, is that the technology will be applied to reduce accidents. It's the same technology, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. You still need HD maps and autonomous systems, or this 4D map that I'm talking about. We actually work with all the automakers, and we're seeing huge requirement around ADAS, L4 systems. So the technology is there. Of course, the context is very different. The training data is very different. The user behavior is very different. And then the application is actually very different.
I think that's a very good point. In my opinion, India will use all these autonomous vehicle technologies, but I don't think India will have really autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
because we are the most efficient country in the world. In 2 lanes, we drive 4 cars. So how can an autonomous vehicle work in that environment? You know, the problem is not vehicles, autonomous vehicles, it's the human beings.
We will have 4 two-wheelers driving in convoys. So, I mean, so you're absolutely right.
Any other question from audience? So maybe we'll end the session by talking about the impact of the 5G technology and all these new things which are coming up, real-time information, and as if Jack can figure out how to get the real-time mapping information with 5G network, which gives you, enough broadband. How do you see it's going to impact the businesses you are in and the overall economy? Half a minute each.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I mean, I think we treat 5G as a very complementary technology in the sense that, first of all, it provides more information about, known infrastructure points that you can tap from. But more importantly, I think this real-time world that we're moving to, there's more and more need for data and consumption of information in a very fast manner. And we think 5G will play an important role in enabling that by providing sort of the real-time analytics and data capabilities.
Rohan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm super excited actually for 5G technology to get rolled out hopefully well, because it is actually one of those fundamental shifts in connectivity and information that will play this role in this autonomous system or immersive experience for this 4D map. So I'm actually quite excited about this rollout. I think this will enable the industry to do a kind of time jump or leapfrog.
Vivek?
Yeah, for me, or for our company, we are users. We are users of data. So I'm just assuming that with this technology, guys like you will ensure that we get more accurate data as you pointed out, in a much faster way, and that of course helps make real-time decisions easier. So I think that's where it is.
Sunil?
Yeah, I mean, today we drop about 30% of data because the horizontal accuracy is not known, and I believe with the better infrastructure, we can consume the data and then reduce our cost essentially and provide more effective solutions.
Arra?
And finally, I agree with my colleagues. I think whatever enhances the lives of the user will be quickly adopted.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel and the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Thanks, Arra.
Nice to see you.